What's up, everyone? I am here with Jaimee Kadish, who I just met last week, and she seems like she's an artist, she's an educator, she's a movement coach, and she just has a wonderful story that I think would really resonate well with the ArtsUP LA community. So I'd love just to start off with for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are. I know your background is in dance, but also kind of how that all started.
Yeah, thank you for having me and facilitating this conversation. I'm really excited to get to know your community more and to introduce myself. I was born in LA and grew up as a mover, played a lot of organized sports, and moved more into dance as a high school student. I went to the Los Angeles County High School for the Arts and got to really focus on my passion for dance. And while I was there, was mentored by amazing humans who really instilled in me that movement is not just for performance. It's this tool that we get to use as humans to express our internal world. And as I started to lose my eyesight, I have a diagnosis called retinitis pigmentosa. It's a degenerative eye disease. I started to realize how much movement was my medicine and my tool for navigating my challenges and the times that felt a bit darker for me. And my goal now is to continue to support other people using movement as a tool to help them find regulation within themselves and to feel like they can face the challenges in their lives.
So, how old were you when you started dancing?
I I've always been a dancer and a mover. My mom tells me I was dancing before I was walking. I didn't start official training of dance until I was in high school. Pretty much 8th grade, I started to prepare for auditioning at LACHSA, and that consisted of a ballet audition, a modern audition, and then also a solo. So high school was really when I started to train for the professional world of dance.
Great. And do you dance perform as a performer now as well?
So I'm actually at this really interesting crossroads where I'm getting back into it. I really, about 10 years ago, when I was diagnosed with my eye condition, cut myself off from the performance world. I wasn't aware of all of the beautiful humans with different needs who are dancing and performing. And so I just decided that world wasn't for me anymore. And recently, I've been asked to join a couple of different projects where I'm getting back into the performance side of dance again.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, at the Kuyam, you mentioned that you run a movement program with youth, both sighted and visually impaired youth. But
Mhm.
you also talked a bit about resiliency, which really kind of struck a chord with me. I'd love to learn a little bit more about where you think your resiliency came from and also how you work to develop it.
Yeah. So I, as a young child, when I was in 8th grade as well, had an experience of losing a very close friend. And when he passed away, it really taught me how precious life was and how it is not something that is guaranteed. And it just lit this fire in me of my friend didn't get an opportunity to do what he wanted to do in this life. So I don't have the excuse of not. And it really gave me my first tool of how to face a challenge and keep moving forward. And at the time, it's when I transitioned into art school, and dance really became that container where I continued to practice moving forward. And now, having a visual impairment, every day I'm faced with opportunities to flex that muscle of resiliency. And that's one thing that I'm really finding out as I continue to grow is that resiliency is a muscle that we can totally train. And the more that we train it in these small ways throughout our day, when we need to really dig deep and find a greater sense of resiliency, we already have this muscle built up and we're ready to flex and go. So, it looks like for me during the day when I'm faced with things like I can't read a label on something when I'm trying to cook and I need to figure out a solution. And there's all these beautiful apps now, or just even community. One of my biggest, I think, tools within resiliency is interpersonal connection. And so when I'm faced with these challenges throughout the day where my eyes are not giving me the information I need to complete a task or to get something done, I can lean into my interpersonal connections with my community to find the solution. So It's something resiliency for me is something that I feel intimately connected with every day. And I have found ways to surrender into the challenge because I know that it's building resiliency, which I'm like so hyped about and so excited to be able to say, like, yes, I was able to face something that at first made me so frustrated and was able to figure out a solution and found more resiliency today. So it's definitely a practice, and it's something that I know we all as humans need and are capable of growing. And as an educator, especially with young children, it's something that I'm really passionate about seeding them with at an early age because life is tough and it just gets harder the more we grow and the more variables we're dealing with in life. And we definitely can use these tools to help support us.
That's wonderful. I mean, I feel like they're so lucky to have somebody to help them train that muscle because you're right. It's such an important personal skill or personal confidence to have at a very young age to know that you can get through this and that you have tools in your toolbox that can help you overcome any of these challenges that
Totally. And I feel like not only can we overcome it, like I've gotten to that threshold where I'm like, yes, I know I can overcome it. Now I'm like excited for the opportunity to have to be resilient because I know it's going to teach me something more about myself. It's something that reveals what I'm truly capable of or a way that I can lean into a community member differently. And it just is that thing that I'm finding brings so much more color to life and makes it so much more fulfilling because I'm not just living this like mundane, I don't want to face anything hard type of life. I'm like getting very curious about the things that are hard because I'm realizing that's when you get these like sweet nuggets of life. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, there's something really rewarding too about the challenges of life themselves, right? I feel like, not to get too like philosophical or existential or anything like that, but like, the way that technology is created is really to make our lives easier, right? But I find
Totally.
that the best relationships, the best things like really take time to earn and develop, and that's something that that challenge I think really allows us. That's really wonderful, and I think they're really lucky to have you to help walk them through that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
feel the same. I mean, the kids inspire me to find what I didn't receive as a child and to teach to that. And as a young child, I was very sensitive, very emotional, which I find to be such a superpower. And also, I didn't have the tools to regulate myself so that I could use my emotions and my sensitivity as information. It became these things that overwhelm me and really put me in fight or flight. So, being able to support young ones developing these skills and tools to just feel more grounded, feel more regulated while they're still facing all of these different nuances of life, it's so rewarding. And I think about it like as a trainer, because I also train adults in personal training and also Pilates. We want to work hard because we know it grows muscle and it makes us stronger. It makes us feel better. It makes us look better. And so I find it to be the same thing with resiliency. Like we want to go through challenge so that we can work hard to find solutions and be creative thinkers because it creates this realm of resiliency that really allows us to then show up to things with a different perspective or confidence that allows us to continue to dream big and expand. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't want to chase these dreams that feel at times unattainable or like we're not ready for. So I find it to be that thing that allows me to continue to grow bigger and dream bigger.
It's incredible. So a lot of your world is movement, clearly,
Yeah,
both with adults and with children. And movement is, as you mentioned, important for everyone. But with the visually impaired and blind community, mobility can be one of those things that presents a really big challenge.
totally.
What are like some of the methods and exercises that you use to help them get a little more confidence in their mobility? Especially, I mean, with Theater by the Blind, we have the whole spectrum. We have some people who really are really cautious and really don't like to be moving on their own in space, and we have some that are on skateboards and
Yeah.
jumping around the room. And so, especially for the ones that are a little bit more cautious, what are some ways that you help make them feel more comfortable moving in space?
Yeah, I love this question. So I started thinking about this when I started doing orientation and mobility training, which is learning how to use the white cane to navigate space. And I was thinking, like, how does someone learn to navigate space when they first don't understand their own body and how it moves in space? So for me, Pilates is that way that you can teach those kinds of ideas and concepts and mechanics, because it's really about learning the ABCs of movement before you create bigger phrases or movement patterns. So you really start to understand where your body is in space. There's this thing within our body called proprioception, which is your body's ability to know where it is without looking. And as someone who's visually impaired, it becomes even more important so that you can be safe and you can feel confident when you're moving. And a lot of that looks like slowing down and starting from basics. Like if you think about a child, we start as a newborn on our back. So as an adult, especially with people who are visually impaired, that's where we start, is on our back on a mat, doing things where we're just lifting a limb, a leg, a arm at a time, and really building this concept of where my knee is, where my hip is, and breaking it down to a very fundamental level so that you're building the blocks up to then laying on your back, to kneeling, to standing, to walking. And it's interesting because I find being in the fitness industry, a lot of people are still wanting that entertainment aspect of movement. And the reality is, as humans, we're designed to learn through repetition. So that's my biggest thing, too, is like teaching people it's not about doing something new every workout. It's about doing the same things and getting more nuanced at that thing. And honestly, that was what ballet taught me. Like ballet is the same, no matter where you go in the world, no matter how good you get, like a tendu is a tendu, a plie is a plie. And the only thing that changes within those moves are how you are approaching it. So it's really taught me the importance of repetition and doing something over and over to really learn this like felt sense. And that's, another thing that I'm learning losing eyesight is I don't rely on the mirror anymore to tell me where my body is in space. I feel it from the inside out. And that's a hard concept for people who have had sight at first and are losing sight as a adult or in their youth, because we build our relationship with our body from a mirror instead of from what it feels like in the inside. So that's a lot of the work that I do with myself, with my clients that I work with as a movement consultant, both visually impaired and sighted, teaching them how to move from the inside out and really getting this understanding of the bones in space. And that's a lot of when I talk with kids, even adults, I use this idea of where the bones are, because we can all kind of conceptualize what a skeleton looks like and have some type of reference for that. And so if you're able to start to visualize that, your brain is what tells your body what to do. So if you start to visualize it and send that to your body, you're creating this really solid connection that will help to start build your confidence as you move in space.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I think there's sort of a meditative element to it, right? Just
Totally.
to feeling your body and feeling your breath and feeling there's a lot of that goes into an actor's training and an artist training. It's really wonderful. And you mentioned a little bit almost earlier about sort of this superhero element to it,
Mhm.
and we spoke a little bit about some of the work that you've done with movement and mobility, and you mentioned a little bit about echolocation as well. And
Yeah.
I would love to hear a little bit more about your experiences with that, because I feel like part of what a huge part of what we do is about changing perceptions about people with disabilities. I mean, we really don't like the word disability because it
Mhm.
sounds something less than or something like that, and it's really
Right.
not the case, right? We're all just different, and we have different ways of interacting with the world, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like with the visually impaired community, the especially with the echolocation, it is like a superpower pretty much,
Totally.
and it's really fascinating. So I'd love to have you maybe explain a little bit about what it
Yeah.
is, and then how somebody who's visually impaired uses it to really to see, basically.
Totally. Yeah. So my O&M instructor, his name is Brian Bushway, and he is one of the experts of echolocation. He really opened up this idea for me again of resiliency and what I was learning through having to navigate differently and go through this challenge, because it was what opened me up to having to try something different and learn a new skill set. So the idea of echolocation is that you're relying more on your sense of hearing to navigate your space. So oftentimes you'll hear people who use echolocation do a tongue click like this. And that tongue click is bouncing sound in the environment and sending a signal back to your brain. And when you start to really tune into the echoes of your environment, you can hear and literally see how it's creating this map of where things are in space, the height of things. You can do it with your hand. If you just put your hand up to your face and make a shh sound and then move it down, shh, you can hear the difference and start to tune into that. And
Wow.
that's basically what you're doing when you're echolocating in a space. People also who are visually impaired and use a cane will tap their cane and use it. You can use a clap. It's a really phenomenal way to start to tune in the brain to perceiving space differently. And Brian Bushway, who was the person who introduced me to echolocation, he says that he's able to literally see fuzzy geometry in his mind. And he's been in clinical studies where they're like researching how delicate, I guess, he can detect spaces. And he's like 3 inches of a shift in an object able to tell. So it's really amazing. For me, it was really inspiring and empowering to be like, oh, okay, like you said, I'm not disabled. I am actually getting an opportunity to learn a new skill set and something that in the reality, all of us can do this. People who are not visually impaired, who are fully sighted, can learn to echolocate. They're just never forced to turn their eyes off. And unfortunately, in our culture today, we've become such a visually mesmerized and hypnotized society that no one would think to like, oh, let me put a blindfold on for a couple hours throughout my day and let the other systems of my body navigate space. Because if we did that, we would start to realize how much information people who navigate life without sight have to offer us. And like you said, like it's not a disability, it's a different way of interpreting and also giving us new, different information that could be so informative and so helpful when it comes to creating what's next. And I heard this in a podcast and I find it to be so true. People with different needs are the innovators, are the life hackers. And if they had more accessibility to spaces to give this information of what they're learning through having to navigate literally a life that is not our society is not created for people who are not on the able ladder. So it's interesting to just get this opportunity through losing eyesight to have to tap into my other systems of hearing, of sensing, of smelling, of like all of these different things that I had available to me before, but I was not aware of, not using. So it really is this like superpower that again, we all could tap into. We just don't slow down enough or challenge ourselves enough to discover it and cultivate it.
Yeah, what I mean, what a cool challenge that would be for people who are, not who are sighted to say, hey, I'm going to take an hour every day and I'm just going to put on a blindfold and I'm going to walk around my house. I mean, there's sometimes that obviously I work with the visually impaired community on a very
Mhm.
regular basis, but we have a theater in Culver City and the light switch to turn all the lights on are about halfway back into the other side of the theater. And there's something, very powerful about the moment when I'm walking in and I can't see at all, especially at
Mhm.
nighttime. And I just sort of like to take a moment and just understand that this is what the theater by the blind participants are doing every day, but
Right.
also just to to get my own feeling in space and my own understanding of what's in front of me and what's around me. And it's just a really I think it's an experience that a lot of people would get a lot out of. So
Yeah, definitely. I encourage when I teach Pilates for my clients to shut their eyes while we're going through that because I do my best to be very descriptive. I teach also online to adults who are visually impaired or blind. So I'm really getting more nuanced at how I describe exercises. So I challenge my sighted participants in my classes to close their eyes, because you're going to inform your body so much differently if your eyes are shut, because your brain is using so much energy to take in light and make image of it through your eyes. And if you shut your eyes, you allow that energy and that brain capacity to go to other areas in the body. And so it's really, really cool to see what happens when you free up some of that space for the other systems of the body to take over and start to like wake up different senses.
Wow, this has been great. So, for you, what else do you have on the horizon? Is there anything that obviously you're doing all these wonderful instruction and educating and dancing. Do you have any other projects coming up that we should know about?
Yeah, so my baby right now that I'm working really hard on creating a container for is movement consulting for children who are visually impaired and blind, and their service providers. So they're teachers for the visually impaired, their occupational therapists, their physical therapists, and their families. My nonprofit is called Insight Outreach. And what I do is work with TVIs, teachers for the visually impaired, and other service providers, finding ways to bring in more movement into their sessions that they are doing with the children they're working with, and to find more ways to infuse play. What I have found being in these spaces with medical professionals or more clinical professionals is that they have such amazing information. There's a bit of a disconnect when it comes to engaging through movement and play, especially with young kids with that information. So I'm using my experience as a movement educator, as an early childhood educator, and as someone with the lived experience of having a visual impairment to support them in what they're doing in their sessions. And it's been super inspiring, also empowering for myself, because I'm now again realizing why I'm going through this challenge because of the information it's giving me, and now how I'm able to be of service to other people because I'm gaining this information. So that's what I'm really working on right now, to create a container for and to be able to provide. I've had a couple of experiences with a really amazing nonprofit in Nashville called Blind Early Services Tennessee, and got to work with a couple of their different service providers, helping kids who, what I'm realizing too, is having a visual impairment or having sight loss is very low incident on its own. So I've been working with kids who also have cerebral palsy or a condition called cortical visual impairment. That's a brain-based impairment. And really getting to figure out how to bring movement and connection to these kids in their sessions. And it has been very life-changing for everyone involved. So that's what I'm focusing on working on right now, as I'm also a movement educator in many other ways. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping will be able to present and offer to many people everywhere very soon.
It's amazing. Well, Jaimee, this has been such a wonderful and enlightening conversation with you. I'm sure that our audience is going to love to find out more about you and all the great work that you're doing. And I just want to thank you for just kind of being a gift to all of us and all the communities you serve.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And thank you for the work that you are doing and this platform and space to continue to amplify and share other people's work and passion. I really appreciate it.